Chained and left as bait for alien beasts in the savage jungle, only one man broke the chains. They say no one comes back from Eden 9. No signal, no bodies, just silence. Relvosk didn't believe in ghost stories. He believed in gravity. So when the sky yawned open and yanked his shuttle down like it had a personal grudge, he stopped thinking and started surviving. The descent wasn't fast. It was violent. The kind of fall that made you feel every micro-fracture in your ribs as the ship tore through layers of atmosphere, heat plating screaming, hull panels warping like wet paper. Instruments blinked in and out, emergency systems hiccuped. A surge hit the nav core, frying the last functioning controls. And then came the forest, or rather, the impact. The ship didn't crash, it burrowed. Trees taller than any earthborn species snapped like toothpicks as metal ripped through them. Vines thick as cables tangled around the nose cone. Sparks sprayed across the console as the entire left side of the ship sheared away. The screech of metal grinding against roots was deafening. When the world finally stopped shaking, Rel was upside down, bleeding from the forehead and choking on smoke. He didn't lose consciousness. He wasn't that lucky. It took him 20 minutes to crawl out of the wreckage, 30 more to check what was salvageable. By nightfall, he had 3 things: a semi-functional pulse pistol, a busted comms array, and a gut-deep certainty that he wasn't alone. Eden 9 wasn't just alive. It was aware. It was a planet that listened. Even during the day, the forest was too quiet. The trees pulsed faintly like they were breathing. Leaves recoiled from touch. The moss gave under his boots like flesh. Sometimes the wind didn't move, but the shadows did. And at night, the air changed. Clicking sounds began low to the ground and multiplied rapidly, like insect legs tapping bone. Distant howls echoed through the treetops. Too human to be animal, too broken to be human. Glowing spores drifted across the underbrush like tiny lanterns. They looked beautiful until you noticed they moved away from your breath. On the second night, Rel thought he saw something watching from the edge of the firelight. A shape, just barely humanoid. Too still to be an animal, too tall to be a man. When he blinked, it was gone. If this place didn't kill him, whatever else lived here would. By the third morning, his ribs ached with every breath and his knuckles were raw from smashing salvage open with a pry bar. Still, he managed to power up a stripped-down signal beacon using solar panels, heat sink cables, and sheer profanity. The signal was weak but steady. It was hope. Half dead and wheezing, but alive. He was halfway through adjusting the emitter frequency when he heard it, a sound that didn't belong. It wasn't one of the forest's unsettling familiar noises. Not the whisper-slick movement of vines or the groaning of trees. No clicks or shrieks. This was dragging. Metal on dirt. Slow. In pain. Rel stood still, spine tense, pistol in hand. Every instinct screamed to hide, but curiosity dragged him forward. He moved through the underbrush silently, ducking low, eyes scanning. Then he saw her. She wasn't supposed to be there. She couldn't be. A woman. Slumped, half crawling from between 2 black-rooted trees. Her body was filthy, skin smeared with dried blood and soot. Her hair fell over her face in a matted curtain of tangled black waves. Her arm was stretched unnaturally behind her, dragging something heavy, something glinting in the half-light, a chain. The cuff around her wrist was alien in make, smooth, organic metal that throbbed faintly with power, even though it looked long dead. It had cut deep into her skin, rubbing raw. Her gait was staggered, like her legs couldn't remember how to hold her weight. Her skin was a dusky, luminous blue, dulled with grime, but unmistakably alien. She collapsed at the edge of the clearing. Rel hesitated. Every story he'd heard about Eden 9 screamed trap, military tests, bioweapons, bait. But this wasn't a trap. This was a person. He stepped into the clearing, lowering his weapon. "Hey," he said, voice cautious but calm. "I'm not with them." The woman stirred, barely. Her eyes cracked open, glowing silver, too large for her face. She flinched, tried to pull herself backward, but the chain yanked her short. Her lips moved. No sound came. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said again. "You need water?" She licked her lips. Then hoarsely, "They didn't forget me. They left me." Her voice was broken glass. Soft, sharp, exhausted. Rel knelt beside her slowly, pulling out his multi-tool. "I'm cutting the chain, okay?" She didn't respond, but she didn't fight. That was permission enough. The metal was fused in places, heat bonded by time or tech beyond his understanding. It took him nearly 5 minutes to break through. She didn't move, didn't cry out when the tool sparked and seared near her skin. She just watched him, breathing shallowly. When the last link snapped, the chain dropped into the dirt with a heavy thunk. She stared at her freed wrist like it didn't belong to her anymore. Rel stood slowly, brushing dirt from his hands. "What's your name?" A long pause. Then, "Neva. I'm Rel, pilot, supply runner. I crashed here." She blinked at that, the tiniest flicker of confusion behind the exhaustion in her face. "You weren't supposed to come." "No," he muttered. "I figured that out." He offered her a water pouch. She took it with both hands, sipping carefully, as though she'd forgotten how. Her skin was stunning up close. A deep, radiant blue under the layers of dirt, with faint, glowing threads beneath the surface, almost like veins filled with light. Her features were sharp and delicate, but her body was wiry, built for motion. There were bruises on her collarbone, scars on her arms, no shoes. And yet, she was alive. When she finished drinking, Rel reached into his pack and held out a ration bar. "It's not great," he said, "but it's better than starving." She sniffed it, tore off a bite, and chewed slowly. Her hands trembled, but she didn't drop it. "Can you walk?" he asked. She tried. Her legs buckled. He caught her before she hit the ground. She didn't pull away, just breathed, eyes wide, afraid to be touched but too weak to resist. "I can carry you." "No," she whispered. "Just help me stand." He moved slowly, letting her shift her weight against him without pressure. One arm over his shoulder, her fingers curled tight into his shirt. She pulled herself upright. Her breathing was shallow, but she stayed on her feet. They didn't speak again as he led her through the forest. The trees leaned closer. The wind didn't move. Behind them, something shifted in the shadows. Too big to be a predator, too quiet to be human. Neither of them looked back. By the time they reached the crashed shuttle, the last rays of sunlight had vanished. Only the faint glow of the emergency beacon lit the clearing. Inside, Rel wrapped a thermal blanket around her and let her settle on a stack of cargo crates. She sat still, eyes tracking every movement he made. He didn't ask questions. Not yet. She didn't offer answers. But when he handed her a second blanket, she met his eyes and held his gaze for a moment longer than before. Not trust, not comfort, but the beginning of something fragile. And as the night fell over Eden 9, bringing with it the cries of things that had no business making human sounds, Rel stood watch at the door. He didn't know who Neva was, why she'd been chained, who had left her here, or why she wasn't already dead. But he knew one thing. This planet was hiding something, and whatever it wasn't done with them yet. Rel didn't sleep, not really. He sat upright, a thermal blanket draped over his shoulders, pistol balanced on one knee, ears tuned to every unnatural sound drifting through the busted hull. Neva was curled in the corner, bundled beneath 2 blankets and a layer of scavenged padding. Her breathing was slow but shallow, like her body didn't know if it could afford rest. Outside, the forest whispered, not the way trees normally whisper, not wind against leaves or branches swaying in the night. This was different. Clicking patterns, soft pulses in the distance, like language, like something was speaking and listening. He didn't like the way the trees leaned closer after dark, the way the spores lit the underbrush just enough to remind him he wasn't alone. Rel kept the perimeter fire low. Too much light drew attention, too little, and they became prey. The chain he'd cut off, Neva, still sat on the floor near the door. It looked older in the dim light, more corroded, wrong in a way he couldn't quite name. He'd seen plenty of shackles and prison blocks during mechanical repair tours. None like this. Organic tech, maybe. Half machine, half something else. Every now and then she stirred, not from cold, but from nightmares. She never spoke in her sleep, but her hands twitched like she was fighting something, or someone. The sun was just beginning to rise, distant and pale, filtered through a thick layer of mist, when she finally opened her eyes. Rel caught the movement and turned slightly. Morning, or close enough. She blinked slowly, eyes glassy. Then she sat up too fast, wincing as her muscles protested. Her wrist, where the cuff had been, was raw, the skin angry and dark. "Easy," he said. "You've been out for almost a day." Neva didn't respond at first. Her gaze swept the room, registering the open hatch, the stripped electronics, the battered consoles. Her eyes lingered on the chain. "You kept it," she said. Didn't want to touch it more than I had to, Rel replied. Didn't know if it'd do something. It won't, not now. You sure? No, she admitted, rubbing her temples, but it doesn't matter, it's done. He handed her a canteen and a ration bar, watching her carefully. She accepted them but didn't eat immediately, just stared down at the floor like she was gathering pieces of herself. You said they left you, Rel said quietly. Who's they? She looked up sharply. For a second he thought she wouldn't answer. Then finally, the ones who built this place, the ones who call it research. Military. Some, not all. Eden 9 wasn't meant for the public, no records, no oversight. They built a jungle and filled it with predators, then dropped people in to see who died first. She paused, then added, the whole thing is run under the AOS directive, Adaptive Organism Studies. It's not a military program anymore, it's corporate. Private contractors, government silence, and full autonomy. No one regulates it, no one admits it exists. Rel frowned. Like, experiments? Worse, she said. Entertainment disguised as science. They watched us. Tracked behavior, adaptation. The monsters out there, those weren't born here. They were made here. That gave him pause. He glanced out the broken window toward the shifting tree line. And you? He asked. What were you? Another test subject? She hesitated. I was supposed to observe. I worked in the tech wing, biointerface systems, species behavior tracking. I wasn't supposed to be in the field. But then I saw what they were doing, what they were feeding to those things. Her voice cracked slightly, and she stopped, clenching the water pouch in her hand. You tried to stop it, Rel said, already sensing the shape of her story. I freed someone, she said. A child, one of the non-viables. They didn't even give him a name. I broke protocol, hacked the door, got him out. Thought maybe he'd run. Maybe he'd survive. He didn't. Rel stayed quiet. The next day I woke up chained in the forest. Just like the ones I used to monitor. No trial, no explanation. Just silence and a chain. Now it was Rel's turn to process. He wasn't sure what he'd expected. Maybe a convict, a rebel, maybe even a spy. Not someone like her. Not a scientist with a conscience. He rubbed the back of his neck. And they just left you there? She nodded. You're supposed to last 2 days. Long enough to gather behavioral data. Most don't make it past 1. How long have you been out here? Her eyes met his. I stopped counting after 8. Rel let out a low breath. Damn. Neva finished her water and set the pouch down. Her hand still trembled. Malnourishment maybe. Shock. Or the weight of finally speaking after weeks or months of silence. You saved me, she said softly, like it still didn't make sense to her. I crashed, he said. You saved me from walking straight into that forest blind. A faint smile touched the corner of her mouth. It didn't last long. You shouldn't have come. Trust me, Rel said. I didn't exactly choose this. Something outside snapped, a sharp crack like a branch being broken by force. They both went still. Rel raised the pistol, stepping quietly toward the open hatch. The forest was dim, dense. Nothing moved. Is that one of them? He whispered. Neva didn't answer. She stood slowly, balancing herself against the wall, then stepped toward the chain lying on the floor. She crouched and picked it up. Rel turned, eyebrows raised. What are you? She held up the cuff, fingers running over its inner surface. It's not just metal. It's a transmitter. They tracked through it. I thought it was dead. It is now. You severed the line. But if any of them are still pinging old data, this might tell them where we were. So we move? We hide. She stepped toward the exit, weak but walking. The light hit her more fully now, revealing just how striking she was beneath the dirt and pain. Her blue skin shimmered faintly in the dawn haze, and her long black hair, tangled as it was, moved like smoke behind her. She wasn't just a survivor. She was a warning. Rel grabbed the bag and followed her. Where do we go? There's an old observation post, not far. If it's not burned out, it might still have clean power. Better shelter than this. He nodded, falling in step beside her as they slipped into the trees. Every step away from the shuttle felt like walking deeper into the mouth of something waiting to close. Behind them, something watched. Neither of them looked back. They both already knew. Eden 9 never let go of its prey easily, and now it had 2 new ones to track. The path to the old observation post wasn't a path at all. There were no trails on Eden 9, not anymore. Whatever clearings once existed had long since been swallowed by the forest. Vines hung low like nooses, roots pulsed faintly underfoot, and trees twisted upward in impossible angles, their bark slick with moisture that smelled faintly metallic. Everything seemed alive, and none of it welcomed visitors. Neva moved like someone who'd learned to live with danger, not avoid it. She kept her head low, eyes scanning the shadows. Her steps were deliberate, weight evenly spread to avoid noise. Even in her weakened state, there was something precise about the way she moved. She didn't act like prey. She moved like she was still part of the ecosystem, even if it had turned on her. Rel followed close behind, trying to mimic her pace, though every snapped twig or rustled leaf made him flinch. It was like walking through a graveyard that hadn't decided if it wanted you buried yet. "Should be just beyond the ridge," Neva said quietly. "You sure?" Rel asked, adjusting the bag on his shoulder. "I'm sure. How do you know this place still exists?" "Because it's where I was trained. And because if it didn't exist," she said, glancing back at him, "we'd already be dead." It was hard to argue with that logic. By midday, they reached a steep incline carved with jagged stone ridges and vine-covered outcrops. Neva paused, placing one hand on a moss-slick boulder. Her breathing had turned ragged. "You okay?" Rel asked, stepping beside her. "I just need a minute." He nodded. They sat beneath the shade of a leaning tree that curved like a crooked finger. Rel handed her water, which she took without speaking. For a while, they sat in silence. Rel watched the light flicker between the leaves and thought about how quiet her footsteps were. He thought about the raw bruises on her wrists, the scar across her collarbone, half hidden by her torn tunic. Every mark told a story, and she hadn't shared most of them. "You said they were building things here," he said eventually. "The predators." She nodded, not looking at him. "Did you ever see them up close?" "Yes." "What are they?" Neva finally turned to him, her expression unreadable. "Mistakes." Before he could ask more, a sudden burst of static crackled from his belt. He jumped, grabbing the comm device he'd jury-rigged from the shuttle parts. The screen blinked with faint orange lines, signal distortion. But it was something. "It's not a rescue signal," Neva said. "It's them, listening posts, scraping data. They're trying to see who's still alive." "Could we use it to ping them? Fake something?" She shook her head. "They'll ignore any distress call unless it comes from a top clearance channel. And if they do respond, it's only to send cleanup teams." "And what do they clean up?" Neva looked at him. "Loose ends." They moved again after that. The terrain got rougher, but Neva pushed forward with quiet determination. Eventually, they reached a cluster of low stone structures hidden beneath a canopy of claw-leaf trees. From a distance, they looked like ancient ruins, but Rel saw the faded outlines of alloy panels and the faint shimmer of dormant shielding tech. "This is it," Neva said. "Substation Theta, one of the early posts. They used it before they figured out the predators could smell signal trails." Rel ran a hand over the edge of the entrance. "This is older than anything I've seen on record." "It's not on record." Inside, the air was stale, thick with the scent of dust, old power cells, and rot. The walls were carved stone reinforced with tech, screens now dark, conduits still glowing faintly with residual charge. Most of the gear had been stripped. Still, the door sealed shut behind them with a groan that felt final. It wasn't comfort, but it was cover. They settled in, clearing space near a panel that still hummed with potential. Rel got to work rigging a portable heat node to create light and warmth. Neva sat near the wall, her knees drawn up, watching him. Not judging, just studying. "You're good at this," she said eventually. "Spent most of my life fixing things that shouldn't still run," he said with a shrug. "I didn't think pilots did repair work. I wasn't exactly first pick for anything. Maintenance was what they gave guys who didn't pass combat quals, but were too useful to let go." "Still," she said, "you're not what I expected." "Same," he replied, glancing at her. "You don't talk like a scientist. Most people who wear lab coats don't think twice about what they build." "I did?" He nodded. Then, after a beat, "You said you freed a child." Her shoulders stiffened. "Yes." "What happened to him?" "I don't know. I saw him run. I heard screams later. But I never found a body." "You still think about him?" "Every night." The silence after that wasn't empty. It was full of the weight they both carried. Later, when the makeshift fire glowed steady and the shadows pressed close around the stone walls, Rel stood watch near the entrance while Neva rested. She didn't sleep, not fully. Her eyes stayed half-lidded, tracking movement in the dark. It wasn't until hours later, when the jungle noises had faded to a low, throbbing hum, that she spoke again. They trained us to see the world in equations, everything broken down into data, reactions, outcomes. But this place doesn't care about numbers. Rel leaned against the frame. What does it care about? Fear. He looked at her. Eden 9 isn't just a testing site, it's a pressure chamber. They wanted to see what happens when you strip away control, logic, identity, how long it takes for people to become something else, something less. And what did you become? Neva didn't answer. Instead, she slowly extended her hand, palm open, fingers relaxed. Not an invitation, not a demand, just offered. Rel didn't move right away. Then he stepped forward, knelt and placed his hand in hers. Her skin was cool, soft but calloused at the fingertips. He felt her pulse, steady but guarded. She looked at him. I'm not what they made me, she said. Not anymore. And for the first time since he'd crashed here, Rel believed maybe he wasn't just trying to survive. Maybe they were both trying to become. Whatever waited outside, whatever watched them from the treetops and whispered in broken language, could come. They weren't alone anymore. The rain came without warning. It wasn't the slow buildup of a storm or the distant rumble of thunder. It simply started, as if someone had flipped a switch in the sky. Thick, warm droplets fell through the cracked stone ceiling, tapping against the metal supports like fingertips drumming out a rhythm only the forest understood. Inside the old outpost, Rel adjusted a canvas tarp over the power node to keep it dry. The firelight flickered across the damp walls, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts. He glanced toward Neva, who sat cross-legged beside one of the dormant interface panels, her arms wrapped around her knees, face turned toward the leaking roof. She didn't seem to mind the rain. He watched her quietly, wondering again who she'd been before this place. Not just the job title or her role in the facility, but who she was when she still had a life that wasn't defined by survival. The way she held herself, alert but controlled, told him she hadn't let the wildness claim her. Not yet. How's the leg? He asked, his voice low, not wanting to break the stillness more than he had to. Better, she said without looking over. Still stiff. You're walking better. I had to. He gave a small smile. You ever not push through? Her lips twitched like she almost smiled back. No. For a while, the only sound was rain and the hum of the energy node. Then she spoke again. I used to think logic was enough, that if you studied something long enough, broke it down into variables, you could control the outcome. And now? Now I know chaos doesn't care about your equations. Rel let the silence settle for a moment before saying, You didn't deserve what they did. Neva turned her head, her eyes meeting his. None of us did. That child didn't. The others they dropped here didn't. You tried to stop it, and it still happened. He moved across the room and sat beside her, not too close but not distant either. That's not on you. She looked away. If I hadn't opened that door, maybe they wouldn't have punished me so harshly. Maybe I could have done more from the inside. Rel shook his head. You made a choice when it mattered. That counts for something. Not if it didn't save anyone. It saved you. She hesitated, eyes narrowing slightly. Why does that matter to you? He paused, searching for the right words. Because I've been around enough people who never stood for anything. People who look away when something ugly happens. You didn't, even when it cost you everything. For the first time since they met, her expression softened completely, just for a moment. A flicker of vulnerability crossed her face before it vanished again, buried under years of survival instinct. Where did you come from? She asked. He chuckled. You mean before I got dragged out of the sky by a homicidal planet? She raised an eyebrow, just a hint of dry amusement in her gaze. Yes. Colony maintenance crews mostly. Grew up in the outer belts. Not glamorous. Mostly junk work. Fuel lines, coolant leaks, busted comm towers no one remembered existed. Not military? Nope. Failed the psych eval. She looked intrigued. Why? He shrugged. Didn't smile enough, apparently. Didn't show leadership traits. Whatever that means. They said I was better with machines than people. She studied him for a long moment. They weren't wrong. That actually made him laugh. Yeah, well, machines don't flinch when you tell them the truth. And people do? Sometimes. She leaned her head back against the wall, letting the rain's rhythm fill the silence again. Rel leaned back too, their shoulders almost touching. Almost. "Why did you really help me?" she asked suddenly, voice quiet. He looked over. "I told you, I couldn't just leave you there." "That's not an answer," he exhaled slowly. "Because when I saw you chained like that, something snapped. It wasn't pity, it was rage, like if I walked away, I'd never be able to look in a mirror again. And not because of you, because of me." Neva didn't respond right away. Then gently she said, "I expected you to hurt me." He turned toward her, but she kept her eyes on the ceiling. "After the chain came off," she continued, "I thought you'd claim something. Everyone here took what they could, food, safety, control. I thought you'd see me as another thing to own." Rel's voice was low but steady. "I'm not that kind of man." "I know that now," she said, finally meeting his gaze again. "But it scared me how long it took to believe it." A beat passed between them, then another, and then something changed. Not with words, but in the space between them. She shifted slightly, just enough for her arm to rest against his. He didn't move, didn't lean in or pull away, just let the contact happen, simple, quiet, unforced. They stayed that way as the rain fell harder, drumming like distant footsteps against the roof. The air grew cooler and the fire burned low, but neither of them moved toward it. Her head eventually found his shoulder, not from weakness, but something else, something quieter, a kind of tentative peace. He said nothing, only adjusted slightly so she could rest more easily. The moment wasn't passion, it wasn't desire, it was something rarer, trust, unspoken and fragile. A thread beginning to weave between them, not in firelight or adrenaline, but in the slow, still moments when no one was watching. Outside, something howled in the distance, long, low, guttural. The predators were still out there, the night still hunted. But inside the stone walls they had found something that Eden 9 couldn't measure, couldn't control, a connection. And that was enough, for now. The sound that woke them wasn't thunder, it was too sharp, too close. Rel bolted upright, pistol already in hand, his heart thudding hard in his chest. Across the room, Neva was already on her feet, silent and alert, her posture tense like a drawn bowstring. The fire had burned down to embers, casting a faint orange glow across the stone floor, but it wasn't enough to push back the shadows beyond the open wall panels. There it was again, a snap, bone-like, deliberate, just outside. "Movement," Neva whispered. "Multiple sets. Close." "Predators?" Rel asked, even though he already knew the answer. She gave a single nod. "They followed the chain, or us, maybe both." Rel shifted to the console, fingers flying over the interface as he tried to reroute auxiliary power to the door seals. A static burst flared, then faded. The panel was half functional at best. Nothing here was built to last this long without maintenance. "They're circling," Neva said. "They don't rush. They study first." He looked up at her. "So what do we do?" "We prepare to be studied back." They moved fast, quietly, like two people who'd done this before, even if never together. Rel stacked broken equipment crates near the entrance to funnel any entry points. Neva pulled wiring from the wall, fashioning a crude trip line rigged with a spark unit that could blind, if only for a moment. "What are we facing?" he asked, voice low as he knelt to attach the final charge. She crouched beside him, eyes scanning the dark. "One of the later prototypes, V6 class. Pattern-adaptive, semi-organic muscle armor. Not fast, but intelligent. They don't strike until they know they'll win. Any weaknesses? They test for them, but they hate fire and loud sounds." Rel almost smiled. "Guess it's a good thing I have a knack for making noise." He handed her a flare cartridge. "Backup, just in case." Their hands brushed, and for a split second the moment stretched. Even with danger pressing in on all sides, their eyes met, and something passed between them. Not fear, not panic, understanding. Then the silence outside shattered. A deep, resonant clang rang out from the perimeter wall. Something massive had just hit the outer shield panel. Then came another, closer. Then a low, guttural growl. It sounded like breathing made of gravel and heat. They stepped back, weapons ready. The firelight flickered harder now, reacting to motion. The node in the corner stuttered, like it could feel the tension in the air. A hiss slithered through the broken ventilation shaft. "They're not coming through the front," Rel said. Neva didn't speak. She grabbed the spark charge, moved silently toward the rear corridor, where darkness stretched unbroken past the wall. She was halfway to the shaft when it burst open. The thing wasn't a beast. It was worse. It moved like something that had once been human, but had outgrown the shape. Its joints clicked unnaturally, limbs twisted in too many directions. Patches of iridescent carapace pulsed along its shoulders, and its eyes, multiple scattered across the face, glowed like dying embers. It screamed, not in pain, in announcement. Neva flung the charge. Light and heat exploded in the hallway, filling the chamber with blinding white and a stench like scorched plastic. The creature reeled but didn't fall. Instead, it lunged forward, straight for her. Rel didn't think. He moved. He slammed his shoulder into the thing's flank, forcing it sideways into the stone. Its claws raked across his arm, ripping cloth and skin. He grunted, shoved harder. Neva was already recovering, pulling the flare from her belt and jamming it into the base of the creature's spine. She twisted hard. With a burst of color and heat, the flare ignited. The thing shrieked, flailing backward, crashing into the far wall as fire licked up its back. Rel grabbed Neva's arm and pulled her behind cover. "That can't be the only one." "It's not," she said, wiping blood from her forehead. "They travel in threes." The next came from the ceiling. Rel fired blindly upward, the pistol's flash lighting up rows of teeth and a tail like a serrated whip. The shot hit the creature's leg. It stumbled, but didn't fall. Then the third entered from the side wall, silent, patient, and far too calm. They were being surrounded. "This isn't a fight we win head-on," Rel said. "Then we don't fight fair," Neva replied. They moved in sync again, this time toward the backup generator room. Rel slammed the door closed as Neva activated the heat core override. It would take time, but if they could build enough pressure in the old fuel cells. "How big of a boom are we talking?" he asked as she worked. "Enough to collapse half the ridge," she said, voice steady. "Small problem. We're in the ridge." She looked up at him. "We won't be when it blows." "How sure are you?" "I'm not," she said, "but I trust you to run fast." That made him laugh, even now. They rigged the timer, sealed the console, and bolted toward the escape shaft, a vertical tunnel that opened out onto the upper edge of the cliffside. It had no ladder, only old handholds carved into the stone. Rel reached the base first, turned and looked at her. "Can you climb?" She nodded, breath shallow. "Can you?" "You first, I'll cover." She hesitated. "You better not get eaten." "Same goes." She climbed. Rel fired one last round toward the corridor, catching a glimpse of two of the things circling the room like wolves. The third, the burned one, was limping but still moving. He waited until Neva was nearly at the top before climbing after her, arm aching, breath burning. They were halfway up when the outpost exploded. The shockwave hit them like a hammer, knocking loose stone from above. Heat surged up the shaft, but the explosion collapsed downward, sealing the creatures inside. They reached the top and rolled out onto the ridge just as firelight bloomed below. Smoke poured through cracks in the earth, glowing with molten heat. For a long time, neither of them spoke, just breathing, just being alive. Rel finally turned toward her, lips dry, heart pounding. "You still think logic's enough?" Neva's laugh was shaky but real. "Logic doesn't get you out of a collapsing tunnel. You do." She looked at him, really looked, and something shifted again. Not just relief, not just gratitude, something more. She leaned in before she could second-guess it. Her lips brushed his, soft, hesitant, testing the shape of something that hadn't been spoken aloud, but had been building quietly since the first time he knelt beside her in the mud and asked if he could help. He didn't pull away. The kiss was brief, gentle, but when they parted, they were changed. Not a rescue, not a transaction, something human. Below them, the fire burned on. Above, the sky opened, and Eden 9 stars blinked silently overhead, as if watching, waiting. And for the first time, they didn't feel like prey. They felt like survivors. The night after the outpost explosion didn't bring rest. Rel and Neva had found a temporary shelter beneath a collapsed ridge, tucked inside the roots of a massive tree that curled up like skeletal fingers grasping the sky. They'd patched wounds, shared what little food they had left, and sat close, backs pressed to the same warm stone, speaking only when they had to. Not out of distance, but because words felt too fragile for the weight they carried. When Rel woke at dawn, he felt the shift in the air before his eyes even opened. It wasn't the cold. Eden 9 was always cold. It was the silence, a kind that didn't belong. The usual distant howls, clicks, and low rustling sounds were gone, replaced by a strange hush that made the hairs on his neck rise. Neva was already awake beside him, crouched at the tree's edge, her eyes fixed on something far off through the roots. "What is it?" he asked. She didn't look back. "A ship." He moved beside her and squinted through the trees. At first, he saw only the broken horizon, glowing faintly with early light. But then it emerged, low, angular, unnaturally still. Not a shuttle, not a civilian craft. This was something else, something clean, cold, military. It had landed a few clicks north, no flare lights, no sound, just presence. Rel's pulse spiked. "Rescue?" Neva's face said everything. "Number retrieval." He sat back, heart sinking. "They're not here to help. They never are." A long moment passed between them, heavy with the return of a truth they'd tried to ignore. They weren't the only ones watching this forest. And now someone had come to erase the evidence of what survived it. Neva pulled a small battered scanner from her pouch and tapped a sequence. The screen buzzed and lit faintly, filtering frequencies. 2 heat signatures, pilot and armed unit. Scouting pattern, not patrol, that's recon. They're searching. "For what?" Rel asked. She looked at him. "For us." He ran a hand through his hair. "We could go back underground, move farther west. They'll sweep the canyons by nightfall. Then the riverline. No cover there." "So we fight?" Neva's jaw tightened. "Number, we outthink them." They began packing quickly, silent, efficient. Every movement had purpose. They stripped their camp of anything traceable, scattering the ashes from their fire, wiping down surfaces. Neva moved like someone who'd done this before. Rel followed her lead, but his mind was elsewhere. If they were here to clean up, who had sent the order? Was it protocol? Or had someone seen the signal Rel tried to send from the shuttle? And worst of all, was it already too late to escape? As they moved through the forest, weaving deeper into the gnarled terrain, Rel caught her glancing at him more often than usual. "What?" he finally asked. Neva hesitated. "You shouldn't be here." "Yeah, well, tell that to the faulty nav systems." "I'm serious," she said. "You don't owe this place anything. Or me." He stopped walking. "What does that mean?" "I was part of it. This system. These monsters. I designed the software that helped them track people. Test patterns. I don't deserve to survive it." He stepped in front of her. "Then I guess it's lucky you saved me first. Because now we're tied." "That's not how this works." "It is for me." They stared at each other in the dense shadows of the trees. The tension between them wasn't anger. It was fear, raw, human fear that something good might not last. She broke first. "I don't want you to die for me." "I'm not dying for you, Neva. I'm living with you. There's a difference." Before she could answer, the scanner in her hand buzzed, fast and sharp. Too close. "They've picked up our old trail," she said. They ran. Branches slapped at their faces. Roots clawed at their boots. The forest seemed to shift as they moved, warping around them like it was alive, trying to slow them down. They reached a ridge overlooking the river valley, just as the sound of a scout drone hummed through the trees. Low-frequency vibrations made the earth tremble. A black shape passed overhead. Sleek, silent, built to kill. Neva ducked, breathing hard. "If that drone finds us, the gunship will follow." Rel scanned the ground. "There's a nest over there, between the rocks. See the white spores?" She nodded. "You want to go into a spore nest?" "I want them to follow us into it." Spore nests weren't just biohazards. They were territorial defense zones for one of Eden's more aggressive species, blind, burrowing predators that hunted by heat and vibration. Most human scouts avoided them entirely. If the drone entered one, "It's a gamble," Rel said. Neva grinned, just a hint of the old fire in her. "You're learning." They dropped down into the rocks, moving low and fast. The spores reacted to their movement, glowing brighter, spinning slowly like dandelion seeds in water. Rel powered on a makeshift beacon from his pack and tossed it uphill, just beyond the ridge. It beeped twice, once to announce itself, once to pulse their fake location. The drone moved. It followed the signal. As it crossed the threshold of the nest, the spores reacted violently. Something moved beneath the dirt, fast. A shadow burst from the earth, coiling and snapping with terrifying speed. Then silence. Then static. The drone's feed went dark. "Time to go," Neva whispered. They climbed the ravine and moved fast, keeping low until the trees swallowed the sky again. When they finally stopped, both of them were shaking, not from exertion, but from knowing how close they'd come. Neva leaned against a stone pillar, catching her breath. That won't buy us much time. No, Rel said, but it tells us something. What? He stepped closer. That we make a good team. She gave him a long, quiet look. We do. Something shifted again. Not like before. Not the tentative kind of closeness that comes from necessity. This was sharper, clearer, more real. She reached up, fingers brushing his temple where a fresh bruise had formed. You need to stop taking hits for me. Can't help it, he murmured. It's the one thing I'm good at. She smiled and then, without another word, pulled him into a kiss. This time it wasn't cautious. It wasn't hesitant. It was fierce. Honest. The kind of kiss born from chaos, of two people clinging to something real in a place built to erase meaning. And in that moment, the world didn't feel like it was ending. It felt like it was beginning. Later, as the light faded and they lay side by side beneath the twisting canopy of Eden 9, Rel whispered, Do you think we'll make it? Neva answered without hesitation. We already are. The sky was wrong. Rel stood beneath it, blinking against the light. For the first time in days, or maybe weeks, the haze above Eden 9 had begun to clear. The thick veil of spores and electromagnetic interference was thinning, revealing a soft blue horizon, streaked with faint gold. It looked unnatural, unfamiliar, beautiful. Neva was the first to speak. That's not supposed to happen. Rel turned to her, still gripping the old rifle he'd scavenged from a dead drone scout. The sky? She nodded. The only time they let the atmospheric filters lift is when there's no one left alive to see it. Rel frowned. But we're still here. Neva gave a quiet smile, dry and tired. Exactly. They were standing at the edge of the last plateau, just above the old communications array, one of the earliest structures built when Eden 9 had first been terraformed. It was half buried now, consumed by vines and rust, but the tower still stood tall, barely humming with residual power. Everything around them felt like the closing chapter of a forgotten experiment, and for the first time since the crash, there was no sound of pursuit. No drones, no predators, no clicks in the trees, just wind, quiet and cool. They descended the slope together, their steps slower now, no longer rushed, not out of safety, but exhaustion. They had been hunted, burned, cut, and starved, but still, somehow, they had survived. Rel reached the comm station's control panel first, brushing dirt off the cracked display. I might be able to patch this into a long-range signal if the solar cells still have juice. Neva crouched beside him. This is old tech. You'll have to bypass at least 3 levels of outdated encryption. He glanced at her with a smirk. And you're going to stand there and tell me you don't know the override codes? She arched a brow. I helped design the system. Exactly, he said, and started pulling wires. Minutes passed. The sun climbed higher. The world around them stayed still. No alarms, no gunships, nothing but a faint flicker from the panel and the rhythmic click of Rel's multi-tool. Neva sat back against a section of fractured wall, watching him. In the shifting sunlight, her features softened, the blue of her skin catching the gold light, her long black hair tangled but free. The rawness in her expression wasn't just fatigue. It was something deeper. I never thought I'd get this far, she said quietly. Rel didn't look up from the panel. Far enough to see the sky? Far enough to feel human again. That made him pause. He set the tool down and looked at her. Was there a moment when you stopped believing you were? She met his gaze. Not one moment, 1,000 small ones. Every day chained to a tree, listening to the things that moved in the dark, knowing no one was coming, watching the same death repeat with new faces. She looked away. After a while, you stopped thinking of yourself as real. He stood and crossed over to her. You're real, he said. More than anyone I've ever met. She smiled, faint but genuine. So are you. Before either of them could say more, the panel crackled to life. The display lit up, showing a flickering transmission bar, followed by a cold mechanical voice. Unregistered beacon signal detected. Relay origin EDEN-9. Transmission channel open. Rel stepped back toward the console. This is Rel Vosk, civilian maintenance pilot. Crash landed during routine supply route, accompanied by former EDEN-9 personnel. Request immediate extraction. There was a long pause. Then a different voice, warmer, human, but clipped with protocol. Acknowledged. Coordinates locked. Shuttle en route. Arrival in T-minus 14 minutes. Please remain stationary. Rel turned to Neva. She was frozen, staring at the display like it might vanish. Her voice was nearly a whisper. They heard us. They answered. And for the first time, they let themselves believe it might actually be over. But Eden 9 didn't let go easily. The wind shifted. A low vibration pulsed through the stone under their feet. Not mechanical, not artificial, alive. From the tree line to their left, something stepped out. Tall, lurching, covered in charred plating and living flesh. A survivor of the outpost explosion, its form warped but functioning. Behind it came two more. Smaller, faster, stalking through the underbrush like shadows come alive. Neva stood slowly. They followed the last signal. They know what this tower means. Rel raised his weapon. We hold them off, long enough for that shuttle to land. Neva moved beside him, already loading the last two flare cartridges into her makeshift launcher. If they get to the array, the signal dies. They won't. The first creature lunged. Rel fired. The shot hit the thing in its shoulder, but it barely slowed. It crashed into the stone, sending a shockwave through the ground. Neva triggered her flare, blinding light and heat exploding across the clearing. The second creature reeled, shrieking, but the third charged straight through the smoke, claws extended. Rel took the hit, knocked flat onto his back as the thing pinned him, its mouth split open, too wide, revealing a twisted configuration of teeth and sensors. Then it stopped. A blade pushed through its neck from behind. Neva wrenched the weapon free and kicked the body aside, grabbing Rel's arm. Up! They moved together, stumbling back toward the base of the tower. The largest predator, the one half-burned and seething, advanced steadily. I can slow it, Rel said. Buy you time to run. No, Neva snapped. You stay with me. Neva, I chose to stay alive for you. Don't make me do it alone. The roar of a descending engine cut through the forest. The shuttle broke through the clouds like a spear of silver light, descending fast and low, sending a rush of wind through the clearing. As it touched down, its side ramp hissed open and a squad of armored figures disembarked, weapons raised. Hostiles at 3 o'clock, Neva shouted. The lead soldier saw the creatures, turned, and opened fire. The air filled with plasma rounds, smoke, and the high-pitched shrieks of engineered rage being torn apart. Seconds later, it was quiet, just the wind, and the shuttle's humming engine. A medic ran forward. Are you injured? Rel gestured to his arm. Scratched. The soldier looked at Neva. You're supposed to be dead. I'm not. He hesitated. You're on the blacklist. Classified threat. Rel stepped forward. If she doesn't go, I don't go. She saved me. Now I'm saving her. The soldier looked between them. Then finally he nodded. Get on board. They stepped onto the ramp together. The forest shrank behind them. The comm tower disappeared into the haze, and the past, chains, fire, blood, fear, stayed where it belonged, in the dirt. As the shuttle rose, breaking atmosphere, Neva stared out the viewport. Her voice trembled. I don't know what comes next. Rel wrapped his arm around her. That's the best part. We get to choose. She leaned her head against his shoulder, closing her eyes. For the first time in far too long, the sky didn't feel like a ceiling. It felt like freedom. The first 3 days after leaving Eden 9 were a blur. The shuttle that rescued them was military, but not from the same faction that had run the experiments. The insignia was different, the tone of the crew colder but not cruel. They kept their distance, not out of suspicion, but because Rel and Neva radiated something that made others hesitate. Something feral, something unbreakable. They were taken to Station Helios, a medical and debriefing facility orbiting a neutral planet outside contested airspace. It was clean, sterile, and full of people trained to look at trauma clinically. But no scan, no blood work, no psychological report could fully explain what Eden had turned them into, or what it had given them. Survivors, yes, but also something more. They were partners. Rel was patched up first. His arm, still swollen from the creature's claws, had fractured but hadn't shattered. The medic said he was lucky. He didn't feel lucky until he saw Neva walking out of her own exam room, no longer covered in dirt and blood, but in clean clothes, her hair brushed, eyes bright and focused, still herself, but somehow lighter. You survived the needles? He teased. I've been through worse. They were given temporary quarters in a quiet section of the station, 2 rooms, side by side. But that first night, neither of them slept apart, not out of fear, But because after everything they'd been through, even silence felt strange if they weren't sharing it. She lay beside him on the narrow bunk, her head tucked beneath his chin, one hand resting on his chest, her breathing slow and steady. "I keep waiting to wake up back there," she whispered. "You won't," he said. "You're sure?" He kissed her hair. "I'll make sure." By the fourth day, word began to spread. A survivor from Eden 9, a whistleblower with classified knowledge, a pilot with a crash log that didn't match the official manifest. Neva's presence complicated everything, but something strange happened. When questioned, she didn't hide. She told them what she knew, the names, the facilities, the experiments, the child, everything. Rel expected the officials to shut her down, to silence her like they always did with people who told the truth. But they didn't. Instead, something cracked. Someone, somewhere, listened. A week later, a news wave broke across the outer systems. Leaked files, audio logs, internal memos from within the Eden 9 program. The media called it the Jungle Trials. The footage showed forests filled with monsters and chains bolted to trees. Test subjects treated like disposable data. There was outrage, then protest, then consequences, and in the middle of it all stood the two names no one expected. Neva Keelan, the woman they thought was dead. Rel Vosk, the mechanic who brought her back. They were offered a deal. Clearance, citizenship, a chance to disappear or start over. They took it, but on their terms. 6 months later, they were living on a quiet, uninhabited moon in the Undari Belt, a place with no labs, no cameras, no experiments. Rel built them a home from salvage parts and repurposed ship panels. Neva designed the energy grid herself. She planted real soil, grew real food. Sometimes they just sat on the rooftop at night, wrapped in the same old blanket from the outpost, watching the stars. One evening, as twilight painted the hills purple, Rel handed her a small, flat object wrapped in cloth. She opened it carefully. Inside was a necklace, made from a piece of her old chain, polished, shaped, softened. Hanging from it was a piece of scrap from his shuttle, etched with the coordinates where they met. Her hand trembled. "Chains mean something different now," he said softly. She looked at him, eyes wide, full of something he'd only ever seen hinted at before. Love, trust, belonging, no longer survival. "I want to build more than this home with you," he said. "I want a life." Tears slid down her cheeks as she nodded. "You already gave me one." She kissed him like she was breathing for the first time. Eden 9 was shut down. The forest was reclaimed by silence. The monsters faded. The screams stopped. But Rel and Neva would never forget. They didn't need to. Because in the heart of that nightmare, they had found something the system never planned for: hope. And in a world that had tried to destroy them, they had done the most radical thing possible. They lived together, free,